Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Ian Scott, and I am the founder of Scott Legal. And today we are going to talk about E-2 visa options, and in particular, E-2 visa options where the investment amount is low or the other factors that might make an E-2 visa case riskier. Just a few things before we get started. Our firm, Scott Legal, is a full-service immigration firm, but we do process a high number of investor visas, including E-2 visas. And this is the case primarily because the firm actually was founded on an E-2 visa. So I am in the United States on an E-2 visa. So do know what it is that you are going through. In terms of some housekeeping items, if you do have questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to add those questions to the Q&A box or to the chat box. We will get to all questions by the end of the webinar. This webinar is being recorded, so a number of things will be sent to you after the webinar. We will send you the recording. We will also send you a free E-2 visa guide that you can access valuable information on E-2 visas. And we will also send you a link to set up a consultation. And finally, we will send you the PowerPoint presentation that we will go through today. So without further ado, we will jump right into the presentation. So the first thing that you require when you're looking at an E-2 visa is, I'd almost call this a threshold requirement, is that you have to be a national of a treaty country. And what that means is that you have to have a passport from that particular country. The country of birth is not important, but having a passport from that particular country. There are a number of countries all over the world in almost every continent. There are about 80 countries all over the world. I think Antarctica is the only continent that we wouldn't see an E-2 visa treaty country. So really quite a selection of countries. Unfortunately, the world's two most populous countries, India and China, are not on the E-2 visa list, but a number of other countries throughout Asia, Africa, South America are also included, and of course Europe are included on the list. So the government publishes a full list of E-2 treaty countries, and sometimes countries drop off the list. Sometimes they're added to the list. Israel and New Zealand are countries that were recently added to the list, and then sometimes countries drop off the list. And because all of everything related to this particular visa is based on a treaty between the United States and the country. So in order for the E-2 enterprise to be eligible, you must own at least 50%. The person from the E-2 country must own at least for 50% of the E-2 company. So we evidence that by looking at the share certificates or the operating agreement if it's an LLC. And the other big requirement is that you must make an investment. And when we say make an investment, we're really talking about spending money. Like, so for example, you can't just say, okay, I want to start a consulting company and then put money into a business bank account and then apply for an E-2 visa. You would actually have to put the money into a business bank account, spend the money, and then apply for an E-2 visa. You also have to prove that the money came from a legitimate source, and personal savings are okay, gifts okay. If you sold a house or obtaining a loan, loans are fine for E-2 visa under most circumstances, but you do have to show where the money came from. And then something we're going to spend a little bit more time on later, but I'm just going to mention it here, is the investment amount. So the investment must be what the government considers substantial. So we are going to talk about the investment amount. We have a slide dedicated to that, so I won't spend much more time on that here. And then just to give you an idea of some typical E-2 visa expenditures for a business, that what you spend money on is really going to depend on the type of business that you have, but sometimes people spend money on inventory, equipment, there might be marketing, office supplies, rent, employees. So really, there can be a number of different things, different expenditures that relate to the particular type of business that you have started. The E-2 visa can apply to starting a business, but it can also apply to purchasing a business. And often when you purchase a business, you may not want to hand over the money directly to the seller. So you may enter into what's called an escrow arrangement, and that's permitted for E-2 visas as well. And the other requirement for E-2 visas is that it really has to do with hiring employees. So the whole reason that the government has this program is because they want to increase have a benefit to the economy, and that relates to hiring employees, job creation. So you may not have to have an employee on day one, but you do have to show the government that the business is going to be capable of hiring U.S. workers. And, we're going to show you kind of ways that demonstrate that requirement can be, can be fulfilled. So the next requirement is the business must be real and operating. So the government isn't kind of looking at people who have an idea that want to start a business. They're really saying that the business should be really close to being operational before you apply for the E-2 visa. And it even can be operational if you have, employees or other people that are running it. It can be actually operational as well. So you are going to look at things like, commercial lease. We're going to look at, the bank account's been set up, the business has already been established. It has a website, maybe contracts with clients or all the appropriate licenses that are required for the business. So all of that has to be done before you apply for the E-2 visa, not after. They're not just kind of looking at people who have an interest in starting a business, but they really want you to demonstrate that. And then usually we show that you're here to solely develop and direct the operation by showing that you own 50% of it, but also looking at, what it is you're planning on doing. You can't just have a business where you're a passive investor and have, plan to have someone else managing that business. You do have to be active in the business. And then you have to show that you intend to return to your home country on expiration of the E-2 visa. And that's usually not a problem. Usually you just have to sign a letter that says that you will, if the E-2 visa expired or your status expired, that you would return to your home country. So the next thing we're going to talk about is, kind of who can apply and how long does the E-2 visa last for. So we talked about, you must be a national of a treaty country, and we talked about the different countries that might qualify. So just to run off a few in different continents. Japan is an E-2 country. South Korea is an E-2 country. In Africa, we have Egypt is an E-2 country. Morocco is an E-2 country. In Europe, lots of E-2 countries: France, United Kingdom, Germany, and in South America, we have lots of E-2 countries as well: Argentina, Chile, Colombia, and many more. So definitely lots of countries to choose from. And then we, in terms of how long the E-2 visa can be issued for, the E-2 visa can be issued for anywhere between 3 months and 5 years. Now, the 3 months sounds like a short amount of time, and that really is because it is. So there are certain countries like Bangladesh, for example, and Morocco, for example, and Egypt, where the E-2 visa can only be issued for 3 months. And what that means is you have 3 months to enter the country, and then every time you enter the country, regardless of how long your visa has been issued for, you have 2 years to stay in the country in E-2 status. But then other countries like Canada, United Kingdom, Germany, the E-2 visa can be issued for up to 5 years. So that still means that when the visa, because you think of the visa as an entry document only, so it allows you to enter, but someone from Canada, for example, would be permitted to enter over a 5-year period. However, every time you enter, you are given 2 years in E-2 status, and after that, the 2 years, you have to leave the country, and you can leave and enter the same day, but that is required that you have to leave the country. So the next thing we're going to talk about, I said at the beginning that we'd have a slide dedicated to this, is how much should the investment be? And this is probably the number one question that we get when we are looking at E-2 visa. So definitely it's how much do I have to spend? Now, the amount is really going to depend on the type of business. This particular visa doesn't have a specific requirement with respect to you have to spend 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. It doesn't have a specific requirement. Instead, what the requirement is you look at the business type and say, well, how much does it cost to get that particular business up and running? And that's what you're required to spend. And if the amount to get the business up and running is a lower amount, like say under 300,000, then really the government is expecting you to spend all of the money that's required to get that particular business up and running. If the business to get the business up and running is a much larger amount, like say $1 million or something like that, then it could be that your investment could be lower in proportion to the total amount that's required to get the business set up. So and we're going to talk a little bit about how we navigate lower investment amounts in this presentation. One of the things that many clients indicate to us as well, I'm starting a service-oriented business, and I don't have to spend very much to get that up and running. I could spend $5,000 on a computer and a desk, and that would be sufficient for for the particular business. But the government is going to require that you spend that you spend more money, because the fact is that E-2 visa with an investment of $5,000 or $10,000 just would never be approved. It wouldn't be approved in any consulate, and probably not even through USCIS. So often, unfortunately, what we many clients find that they have to do is that they have to spend money on things that they otherwise wouldn't spend money on, right? So it's not that, that's certainly not intuitive in terms of in terms of that's certainly not intuitive in terms of the what a good business owner would do, but unfortunately the E-2 visa does require that you spend a substantial amount of money before. Now, when we're looking at service-oriented businesses, we recommend to clients that they spend between close to $50,000. Now, and as I said, that sometimes can be difficult, and we have had clients that have spent a lot less, but the less you spend is the riskier that your case becomes, I believe. So the other thing to kind of think about with respect to investment amount is that, we try to discourage people from kind of indicating or coming to us and saying that, just what investment amount should I have, right? Like, what is the investment amount? To just give me a number. And we do try and discourage that. And the reason is that there are a lot more factors that go into an E-2 visa application that determine exactly what the investment amount should be. So, for example, one factor might be which consulate are you applying at. There are consulates that are willing to accept lower investment amounts and others that aren't. But another significant factor is, are there other factors in your case that are strong such that you can have a lower investment amount, right? So that's going to be something that is going to be very important to consider, because if you have those, so for example, you have a lot of letters of intent or a lot of clients, or you already have employees, for example, then you may be in a situation where you're able to invest less, right? So we have two examples here that are pretty straightforward, that I'll let you take a look at them. But they're trying to kind of really illustrate this point. In example 2, we do get a lot of that, like clients who say, well, my business, I don't really require, I don't have to spend anymore because I've spent everything that's required, and I still want to apply for the E-2 visa. But it is not a very good strategy, unfortunately, because the consulates, it's possible they accept it, but the consulates could very well not accept it. So then, another common question that we have are, what are some common E-2 visa expenditures that come up? So there are a number listed on the slide here. Things like rent, it's a great E-2 visa expenditure. You're not required to have a lease, but 99% of our clients have one. It's a great E-2 visa expenditure. Equipment is really good. Furniture is really good. Employee payments are good. If you have a business that requires inventory, that can be great for an E-2 visa. The next slide, I think, talks about some that are not that great, and one that's on here, we have here training courses, restrictions apply, and really because they really should be discrete training courses that and not a significant part of your investment. The same thing with cars and trucks. If the business requires it, if you're starting a taxi business or you're starting a food delivery business, then certainly a vehicle is going to be required. But if you're starting a consulting business, then it's not going to be a very good E-2 visa expenditure. And then the next slide, we have a number of kind of not great E-2 visa expenditures. Most of these we would never include in an application, like meals, accommodation, especially the accommodation when you're coming to organize the E-2 visas. But expenses that are paid to related parties, like relatives or companies that you own and things like that. Those are things that we typically wouldn't want to include in an E-2 visa application. So now, when what are some challenges, or some strategies rather, with dealing with low investment amounts, or and we say in particular with consulting businesses, because as I said, we tend to all understand that the amount that's required to start a consulting business is going to be very low, right? So you have to put yourself in the consular officer's shoes. So one thing is to look at the individual's background, right? So one of the reasons I think that my case was quite compelling to an officer is I had a business background at an MBA, I was a CPA, and I think the officer could see that I had the ability to attract different clients. The other thing is sometimes spending money on things that maybe you wouldn't otherwise spend money on. And again, like, I got a lease for a year. I paid $1,700 and I was committed for a year. And I didn't need the lease. There's no question. I didn't need it. I didn't have any clients. I didn't need a space to work. I had a space at home. But I think it did really help my application. It really helped my application in the end, because it showed that I was committed, right? Another is sometimes investing in different things that you may not otherwise, like investing in marketing, hiring people, can be very useful. I think the other is showing the consular officer that your business actually is or could be very viable, right? So if you have letters of intent, I think that's a great way to show them that. Or if you have actual contracts, that's a great way to show them that. And then, as I mentioned before, if you actually have employees, that is going to be something that is really good for showing a consular officer that you are going to be able to hire U.S. workers. So the other type of business that sometimes can be challenging for E-2 is real estate investment business. So this can come in lots of different forms, but the most common form that we see is people, like, they want to buy a couple of houses and renovate them and flip them. And this can be difficult because the government sometimes thinks that this is a very passive form of business, and as a result of it being a passive form of business, they may not approve the application because they believe that that you're not going to be able to create U.S. jobs. That just an individual could kind of do that on the side without without really requiring an E-2 visa. So that's but we have had success, and sometimes it can be individual who, instead of just having a couple of properties, like one E-2 visa that we did, the person had over 50 properties. So that's it could be a situation like that, where the individual has a large number of properties that they such that it is clear that the business is going to require workers, right? U.S. workers in order to operate and run the business over an extended period of time. The other thing is, if sometimes it can be how you position the business. Like, instead of positioning the business as a home flipping business, you might position the business as a home renovation business. So then your investment amount doesn't have to be as large, because if you're positioning it as a home flipping business, then your inventory really is houses, and so you'd have to have spent quite a bit of money on maybe a number of different houses to be able to position the file in that manner. But we have been able to successfully do E-2 real estate, E-2 visas for real estate companies that we have been able to do this for brokerage firms, real estate management companies, renovation, construction, and also house flipping. So the other kind of investment where we see the area where we see the government worried that the E-2 business is too passive is when the situation where you have equity trading. So this can be a hedge fund, it can be an equity trading fund, etc. And we have done a number of these, and we've successfully done them. But the key is to show that it's not, you're not trading your own money, you're not trading your family's money, you're trading other people's money. And then when you do that, the industry is highly regulated. So you want to make sure that you have all of the licenses in place. In fact, the major expenditure related to this type of business has to do with the expenditures related to getting the business up and running from a legal perspective. So there usually are, legal expenditures. The next thing we're going to cover is, common reasons E-2 visas are denied. So one is low investment amount, and even if an E-2 visa is denied because of low investment amount, one good thing about that is you often are able to remedy that and reapply by spending more money and maybe getting a CPA letter. And that's another kind of area that I kind of mentioned that is beneficial in terms of strengthening a case is getting a letter from a CPA where the CPA says that for this particular type of business, the person has spent everything that's required. So that's another kind of tip for even like a consulting business or something like that. The other is the nature of the business. So we talked about real estate and equity trading businesses. Sometimes that makes it more difficult. The other reason for denial is where you file. Unfortunately, all consulates are not created equally. So it's, there's some consulates that have good reputations for E2, and then some consulates that just unfortunately don't. The other big reason, and this is a really difficult one to overcome, is when the person has a business in their home country and that business doesn't have employees. Like we had one case where the person had an IT consulting company and they had it in their country for the last 15 years, but were not, they didn't ever have any employees there. So that the government felt that they would come to the US and not be able to have employees based on the track record. And that links into the next one, just concern as to whether or not the company is going to be able to create U.S. jobs. And then the final couple, just issues with the adjudicating officer. Sometimes you just get a difficult officer. And then finally, the person's just not eligible. This would never happen in the case that we file, but we have had situations where the individual has filed on their own or used another lawyer or, to file, and they just procedurally weren't eligible. In some cases, even they weren't from a treaty country, and someone filed the application. So there are other things that make people ineligible, but that's their business. They haven't spent any money yet. They just took the money and put it all in a bank account, and all of that's another example of something that would make you procedurally ineligible. In terms of trends with COVID slowed down E2 processing in consulates significantly. There's still some consulates, unfortunately, that have still not rebounded and recovered. Most have, at least, they may be slower than they were before, but most have rebounded. The other thing is that even with the change in administration, the prior administration, we haven't really seen much difference with respect to E2 approvals. E2 approvals are quite high, rates are quite high. The government posted approval rates are over 80%. Our approval rates are over 98%, but past results don't predict future outcome. But it is a visa that the government encourages and wants to get approved. So with the timelines, you really do have to check with the individual consulate. We do see a lot more USCIS filings just because of the timing, because some consulates are taking a lot longer. The problem with USCIS filings is that it's not a visa, so you're only really getting the time in the United States that the 2 years in the United States, and once you leave the United States, that particular filing becomes null and void. So some issues and complex areas that come up and questions that people sometimes ask, do you have to hire employees before you apply? And the answer to that is no. Probably 80% of our applications don't have employees before the application is filed. You just have to have a business plan that shows that you plan to hire employees and have other indications that your business is going to be viable. If you have you do have to show where the money came from. When you're applying at a consulate, they don't tend to focus on this much, but when you're doing a USCIS application, the focus on source of funds is quite extensive. So that is something that you do have to spend a lot of time on. You have E2 investor visas. You can have 50-50. It can be two different people from two different countries. So that's something that we see a lot. In terms of changes, like let's say someone starts a consulting company, but then they decide, hey, I'd like to open a restaurant now and change my business. You can do this, but you do have to kind of get approval from the consulate if the change is substantive. And similarly, the E2 visa always requires that the E2 entity is at least 50% owned by nationals of the treaty country. So changes of ownership can impact your ability to keep the E2, in the future because that 50% does have to be maintained. And the other thing you have to kind of be conscious of is kind of family purchases, right? We've seen a lot of problems with this where people have purchased businesses from family, and the consular officer really just doesn't believe that anything has gone on. So if you are purchasing business from family members, you should really get a formal valuation of the company that you're buying, and have really clear flows of the cash flow that, that to show the officer that you are actually buying something, even though it's from a relative. So it's permitted, but we have had situations that have resulted in denial where the officer didn't really believe that a transaction was occurring. Excellent. So that is the webinar, and we do have a number of questions. So I'm going to turn to those now. So I'm just going to read them and then answer them. So hello, Scott. Thank you very much for the presentation. We've been working on our project for 3 years, and we are stuck in the commercial space leasing. Our business idea is to open a dog grooming cafe shop. Okay, we have $100,000 saved for this, but I'm not sure how much it would be safe to spend on a lease considering CAMs and all. We have most initial tools here in Chile, but I'm afraid to run out of money. What are your suggestions? Well, I think that $100,000 certainly is enough for a business, an E2 business. I would say that if you were opening up a dog grooming business and cafe, then the lease is going to be important because I think most of the time that the dogs would be brought there. If the business model is that you're going to people's houses and grooming the dogs, or I mean, the cafe sounds like that, shop would be actually needed and required for the business. So I think that the lease is important, but keep in mind that most E2 visas are approved. So I know it is kind of a scary thought to invest the money and then kind of wait for the approval, but most are approved. Our legal fees, and then another question: are legal fees included as expenses? Yes, we include legal fees as expenses in the E2 visa expenditures. Okay, so someone had trouble logging on. I think most were able to, but let me see here. You mentioned reputation of consulates and the willingness to accept lower amounts. Thoughts on Toronto? Yeah, so we file in Toronto a lot. Toronto does accept lower amounts, but still I'd keep it, 40, 50,000. 50,000 is definitely better, but they're definitely a consulate that will accept 50,000. There are consulates that would never accept anything under 100,000. So if we are acquiring a franchise business for E2 visa and the franchise state that it offers financial facility, can you explain what does it mean? I don't know. I don't know what that means. So if there's some term in your franchise documents that you're unfamiliar with, you might want to seek a business lawyer to see what it means in the context of the whole document, because I'm not sure. Based on what you wrote, I'm not sure what that. I imagine it's a lengthy document. I'm not sure what that means. Can I apply for E2 first and buy business once visa is approved? No. So that goes back to, you may have joined later, but you can't get an E2 and then buy a business. You'd have to buy the business, and one choice that you do have is putting the money in escrow with the sole condition that the money would be transferred to the seller based on the approval of the E2 visa. But you can't. It's not, unfortunately, if you buy a business, have to do it before or with escrow. If you start a business, you have to spend the money, put the money in a bank account, then spend it. I'm planning to buy a liquor store for E2. Okay, that's fine. Hi, Scott. Would the size of the family influence the amount of the investment required? Nope. Doesn't matter. That does not matter. Your family can be any size. If you have 2 investors, you would want to increase the investment amount, but your family can be any size. That doesn't matter. I'm inviting E2 visa partners to join me in the US for trash out debris removal business. Okay. Soft pressure wash and transportation business. These businesses are okay, right? Yep, they're fine. Yeah, those businesses are completely fine. Does your firm handle escrow or something that must be sought elsewhere? Yeah, we do. We don't hire, if we represent the client on the E2, we don't handle the escrow as well, because it would be a conflict of interest, because the escrow, there could be a dispute between the client and the other side, which if we're representing the client, there could be a dispute that wouldn't work. I have a startup that was launched in 2020. I'm accessories design based out of Canada. I'm producing accessories in Italy, handbags, and recently got trademark in the US, but I filed in Canada. How would I go about showing these investments, or can I? And would me renting a place to work from home in US be part of the office space I'd be selling online? Okay, so two different questions here. So let's handle them both separately. So we recommend getting commercial office space, even if it's a commercial office space like WeWorks or some company where you can go to month to month. So there is the option of working at home from home, but I think that is not good for an E2. But so you can do it, but it doesn't help your application. In fact, it hinders it. Then the next question has to do with investments that are made outside of the US. I think that's what it's getting at. So yeah, you can include investments that are made outside the US. So if you paid money for a trademark that was registered in Canada that's going to be used in your business in the US, then under this fact pattern, if you weren't kind of running another business and that didn't get included in other business expenditures, then you could certainly include it. We recommend generally that you not have more than 20% of your expenditures made outside of the US. So that's something to keep in mind. What consulates have better reputation for E2 approvals? Chilean consulates nowadays are rejecting a lot of visas. Is it feasible for nationals from Chile to apply for another consulate? Well, it's difficult, unfortunately. There is sometimes an opportunity for individuals to apply at different consulates, but generally speaking, you have to apply at the consulate in your home country. Fees, just send us an email and we can send you a fee summary. And how long does it take to get a visa from my partners? So the process, it depends on the consulate. We will process an E2 visa application within 15 days of you giving us giving us the information. So again, someone asked about fees. So just email us and we will send you you'll get an email basically with this presentation. If you write back saying, can you send me a fee summary? We'll definitely do that. Should we have a three-way call with you in my E2 visa process? Yeah, you can definitely set up a consultation. At the end of this, when we send this out, we will send you a link to set up a consultation, and that can be a Zoom call, so anyone can join that call. We do charge $150 for 30 minutes and $250 for a 1-hour consultation. But excellent. So that looks like all of the questions. Actually, let me just make sure. Okay, they're all in the Q&A, not in the chat. Perfect. Okay, good. So that looks like all of the questions. So thank you very much again for joining. And yeah, we're definitely happy to help you, obtain your E2 visa dream. So definitely contact us if you need assistance with your E2 visa application. Thank you.